Imagine being the quietest person in a building full of women who have taken a vow of silence, and being the only one who notices that something is deeply, dangerously wrong. That is exactly what happened one winter morning inside a convent on the edge of Rome, when a nun named Sister Elena found a letter that was never meant to be opened by her, never meant to be read by her, and never meant to change the course of history the way that it did, because the moment her fingers touched that envelope, she became the only thing standing between an assassin and the life of the Pope. Before I take you inside that story, I want to ask you something, and I mean it. If you love hidden stories about brave women, wartime secrets, and the quiet heroes history forgot, then you belong here on The Secret Nun, so go ahead and subscribe right now, because every week we bring you a true story that most people have never heard, and this is one you will not believe. Now, Sister Elena was not famous, she was not important by the world's standards. She was a small woman with tired hands who spent her days tending to the convent's records, sorting the mail that came in for the sisters, and answering the door for travelers who needed food or a place to rest. And because she did that work quietly and without complaint, nobody ever paid much attention to her, which is exactly what made her dangerous to the wrong people. The morning it all began, the post had arrived late, the way it sometimes did in winter, and the pile of letters was thicker than usual because the Holy Week was approaching and pilgrims were writing from all over Italy asking for prayers, for blessings, for a candle to be lit in their name, and Elena was working through the stack one by one, checking the names, sorting them into neat little piles for the abbess to review, when her hand stopped on a letter that made no sense at all. It was addressed to the convent, but not to any sister who lived there, and the name written on the front was one she did not recognize, and there was something about the paper itself that felt wrong, heavier than it should have been, sealed with wax in a way that looked too careful, and in that small moment, a very quiet voice inside her told her not to set it down, but to hold on to it, and so she did. She slipped the letter into the pocket of her habit and finished her work as if nothing had happened, because if there was one thing Elena understood, it was how to move through a room without being noticed, and right then, being unnoticed felt like the safest thing in the world. Later that night, when the other sisters were asleep and the convent had gone still, she lit a single candle in the small room where the records were kept, and she opened the letter with hands that she forced to stay steady, and what she found inside did not look like a letter at all. It was a short note, written in a careful, cramped hand, and it was not addressed to her, and it did not say anything about prayers or pilgrims or candles, and the more she read it, the more her blood went cold, because the note was not a letter, it was a message between two men who were planning something unspeakable. And the words that stopped her heart were these: the target would be in the chapel at dawn on the third day, and the blade would be waiting. Elena read those words again, and then a third time, and she understood with a sickening certainty what they meant, because the third day from that night was the day the Pope himself was scheduled to visit a small chapel just outside the city to pray for peace, a visit that had been announced quietly, almost secretly, so that the people would not crowd the roads, and if the men who wrote this letter knew about that visit, then the target could only be one man, and the blade could only mean one thing, and suddenly the quiet nun with the tired hands was holding a warning that could save a life, if only she could get it to someone who would believe her. Here is where the story turns dark, because the moment she decided to act, she realized how completely alone she was, for she was a woman, and a nun, and a nobody in the eyes of the powerful men who guarded the Vatican, and if she walked into the city and told them she had opened a letter that was not hers and read a plot against the Pope, they would likely smile at her, pat her on the head, and send her back to her candles, and by the time anyone took her seriously, it would be too late, and that thought terrified her more than the men in the letter ever could. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She went to the abbess, the older woman who ran the convent, and she laid the letter on the desk and spoke the truth in a shaking voice, and the abbess listened, and for a long moment the abbess said nothing at all, and then she told Elena something that made the room feel even colder than it already was, because the abbess told her that the man whose name appeared at the bottom of the note was not a stranger, that he was a man who had once been trusted inside the very walls of the church, and that if he was involved in something like this, then they could not trust the ordinary channels, because the plot might reach higher than either of them wanted to imagine, and that meant the warning could not be mailed, could not be whispered to a priest, and could not be trusted to anyone whose loyalty they could not be certain of, which left only one person who could carry it, and that person was Elena herself. She had never in her life left the convent at night, had never traveled alone into Rome, had never once imagined that she would be the one holding the fate of a man's life in her two small hands, and yet by the time the candle burned low, she had made up her mind, because the alternative, the thought of sitting in her room while an assassin sharpened a blade, was not something her conscience would allow her to live with, and so she took the letter, and she wrapped herself against the cold, and she stepped out into the darkness with nothing but her faith and the terrible weight of what she knew. The road into the city was long and the night was bitter, and every sound made her heart jump, every shadow seemed to move, because now that she understood what the letter meant, she also understood that the men who wrote it would not hesitate to silence anyone who got in their way, and she was a small woman walking alone through the dark with a secret that could get her killed, and the fear was so thick she could taste it, but she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, because a man's life hung in the balance, and because deep down, beneath all the terror, there was a steel in Elena that even she had never known was there. When she finally reached the edge of the city as the sky began to turn grey, she did not go to the grand doors of the Vatican, because she was too afraid, and she did not go to the police, because she did not trust them, and instead she went to the one place where she knew a good man could be found, the small parish church where a young priest named Father Marco had once visited the convent and had always treated the sisters with kindness, and she banged on his door until he opened it, and when she told him everything, he did not laugh at her, he did not pat her on the head, he simply went very pale and asked her to show him the letter, and the moment he read it, she saw the same cold understanding cross his face that she had felt in her own chest the night before. Father Marco knew a man in the city, a man who had once served in the Pope's own guard, and he told Elena that if they could reach that man before dawn, then maybe, just maybe, there was still time, and so together the two of them ran through the waking streets of Rome as the sun began to rise, the nun and the priest, an unlikely pair carrying a scrap of paper that meant the difference between life and death, and every church bell that began to ring made Elena's stomach drop, because each one sounded like a clock counting down to the moment when a blade would fall. They found the guard, an old man named Giuseppe who walked with a limp and carried himself like a man who had seen too much, and when he heard their story he did not ask for proof, he did not demand to know why a nun had opened a letter not meant for her, he simply stood up, reached for the old sword he still kept beside his bed, and told them to come with him, because if what they said was true, then every second mattered, and the three of them hurried toward the chapel where the Pope would soon be kneeling in prayer, completely unaware that death was already waiting for him. The chapel was small and plain, the kind of place a pope visits when he wants to be humble, and the plan had been for him to arrive at dawn and pray alone with only a handful of trusted men around him, and as Elena and Marco and Giuseppe drew closer, she could see the figures beginning to gather, and her eyes searched desperately through the crowd for anything out of place, for a man who did not belong, for a hand hidden inside a coat, for the glint of a blade, and then she saw him. There was a man standing near the side door of the chapel, a man in the simple clothes of a servant, but there was something in the way he stood, too still, too watchful, his eyes fixed on the road where the Pope's carriage would soon appear, and Elena grabbed Giuseppe's arm and pointed, and the old guard looked, and he knew, the way a man knows the shape of danger after a lifetime of facing it, and without a word he began to move toward the man, slowly at first so as not to raise an alarm, and Elena's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, because the Pope's carriage was now visible in the distance, and there was no time left, no time at all. What happened next happened so fast that Elena would later have trouble remembering it clearly, because Giuseppe reached the man just as the carriage was pulling to a stop, and he saw the glint of the knife as the assassin's hand slid toward it, and the old guard threw himself forward with a strength that did not belong to a man with a limp, and he drove the would-be killer to the ground just as the first cry went up, and the men of the Pope's guard closed in from every side, and in the chaos, as the Pope was hurried back into his carriage and the assassin was dragged away with a blade still clutched in his fist, Elena stood there in the cold morning light, shaking, and realized that she had done it, that the quiet nun nobody noticed had stopped an assassination, that her two tired hands had held the life of the most powerful man in the church, and she had not let it fall. The Pope was not told her name that day, because the men who handled such things preferred that the whole affair be kept quiet, but word of what she had done spread anyway, the way such things always do, and in the weeks that followed, a quiet message came back to the convent, a message of thanks from the highest halls of the Vatican, and Elena was never given a medal, and she was never made famous, and she went back to her desk and her records and her quiet life exactly as before, because that is the thing about the women history forgets. They do the impossible and then they simply return to the small room where their candles burn, and they ask for nothing at all in return. But the story did not end there, because the men who had written that letter had friends, and the plot that had nearly taken the Pope's life was only one branch of a darker tree, and in the years that followed, Elena kept her eyes open the way she had learned to do, and more than once, a letter that seemed wrong, a face that did not belong, a whisper in a corridor would send a small shiver down her spine, and she would remember that the people who wanted to tear the world down never really go away, they only change their shape and wait for the world to stop paying attention, which is why the rest of us can never afford to look away. So now I want you to sit with that for a second, because the moral of this story is not really about popes or assassins or even about one brave nun, it is about the quiet ones, the people who do the small, faithful, unglamorous work that nobody sees, because those are the people who notice the letter that does not belong, and those are the people who end up saving the world while the rest of us are still asleep. If this story gave you chills, or made you think differently about the women history left out of its pages, then do me one favor, drop a single word in the comments below, tell me what you felt, tell me if you would have opened that letter, tell me if you would have had the courage to walk alone through the dark the way she did, because I read every single one of your comments and they genuinely keep this channel going. And before you go, I have one more small thing to ask of you, and it matters more than you think. Share this story with one person, a friend, a mother, a daughter, someone who loves hidden history the way you do, because these forgotten women deserve to be remembered, and the only way their stories survive is if people like you pass them on. So hit that share button and help me make sure Sister Elena's name is not lost to time. If you want to hear more stories like this one, the kind that start with a small ordinary moment and end with a life changed, then make sure you are subscribed to The Secret Nun, because there is a whole vault of courage and betrayal and survival waiting for you, and the next story is already being written, and trust me when I say, you are going to want to be here when it drops. Thank you for staying until the end, thank you for believing that the quiet ones matter, and I will see you in the next story.